Hey guys, it's Samantha from Black Nation News. And today I wanted to come with you guys with this new information that I just heard on Dr. Mumbi Saraki's show. As I told you guys, I am subscribed to her. I love her channel. She's always bringing it with the great, latest news. And I do think it is important that Black people have our own media and we shape our own narrative. It's no more of MSNBC, Fox, etc., telling us our news because they don't tell it from the Black perspective. Plus, they are usually going to keep details out because ultimately have an agenda for white supremacy. So it's really important for us. I am encouraging Black people to create a channel. If you love Black people and you want to get messages out to them, please create a YouTube channel. There can never be enough. Our voices are being heard. Something that's going on right now, I've noticed probably some months ago, maybe a few months ago, that mainstream media, like those mainstream media outlets, the news outlets, MSNBC, Fox, Joy Reid's show, I think she's on NBC. Those news outlets actually are following the news that's being put out by the new Black media. And that's what we call ourselves because we are new. Some of us have been doing it for a long time, for a lot longer. But I feel like, it is new. It's been like the last, because, of course, the internet probably came on the scene really like maybe just 2 decades ago. So we have always had media. Media has always been important. For any community, especially for the Black community, because for too long we've had white people telling our stories. And there was a quote by someone, I can't remember who said it, but they were basically saying if you have the villain, or basically in so many loose words, I can't remember the exact verbiage, but they said if you have the villain telling your story, they're going to always paint themselves as the heroes. So it's basically like because white people have always been telling the stories, they always give Black people this negative light. That's just not true. So it's really important for us to tell our own stories. I have reiterated to people that Black representation matters. So, when you have, whether you buy your child a little baby doll or you're wearing, like my children, when they watch cartoons, I make sure they're watching Black children. We watch Akili and Me. So those things are important. So your children can see themselves in whatever they do, whether it's, just playing with toys, their toys should be Black. Just playing with watching cartoons, the character should be Black or just not have any kind of race, enough. Like we need to start early because white people start very early trying to brainwash our children, bringing out these characters like from very early. Our babies are looking at white people being the victors and winning and the kings and the queens and the superheroes. And immediately children are already identifying that and putting those two and two together because children are actually very, very smart, way more than adults usually give them credit for. But babies are usually putting that stuff together and start to say, okay, white is better than Black. And they actually had a study that they had a little Black doll and a white doll, and they were asking little children, I think they were 4 or 5 years old, which doll was bad, which doll was good, those kinds of questions. And usually whenever it was a negative, like which doll would you think would be the bad doll? The children were already pointing to the Black doll, and that was white children and Black children. And when they would say like, which doll do you think is more beautiful? The children would point to the white doll, and that would be Black children and white children. And it was very disheartening to actually just watch that study. So on to the main topic of this video is UK is paying 200 million pounds in compensation to Windrush victims. This is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful news. And the reason why it is because we're starting to see Black groups getting their reparations for wrongs that have been done to them by white governments. And that's huge because, of course, you guys know ADOS, the American Descendants of Slaves, are fighting for the biggest reparations compensation package award that has ever probably been given in history because of the atrocities that were done to Black Americans during slavery. So this is great news. I feel like these types of stories and wins are amazing. I'm so happy for the Windrush victims that they are getting what is owed to them and what they deserve. They built Great Britain, and then they were trying. The white British people were trying to deport them and push them back to the Caribbean islands where they originally came from, once they had built up their country. And I'm sorry, but this sounds like I'm talking about my story or the ADOS story, because that's basically what's happening with us. Is we built up America, and now they're trying to kill us off and figure out a way to get rid of us. So this is amazing news that UK has basically admitted that they did do a wrong, and they did. It was absolutely disgusting. I found out about this story probably a couple of years ago, and I was like livid about it. Like, I was talking about it on social media, I was sharing the stories, and I was letting people know what was going on in Great Britain. Was it? Oh, in the UK. And that's what's so important. Social media has so much power. You do have a voice. You can now speak out against stuff that normally the nation's news would not allow these stories to be heard. And that the internet that God has given us this talent to be able to say, no, this is wrong. Look what they're doing to us. Because I saw a lot of YouTube videos of interviews with Windrush victims, and it was just so sad. Like, I was so angry. Like, how dare they, take the benefits of Black people building their raggedy country that was in ruins after the war. I can't remember which war it was, probably World War II or one of those wars. Um, and I was just pissed. I was like, how dare they, have them build up this country? Because to me, like, when I see a Black person, this is how I think. I don't know, like, if this is too like naive or just dreaming of something that I think it will happen. Personally, I do think this will happen. The Black unity is happening now. But when something happens to a person who looks like me, and do not call me person of color or a minority, don't lump me in with the group. We are Black people. We are Africans. So when something happens to people who look like me, I am personally offended, because that could have been me. This treatment is essentially happening to people because they're Black. It's not because they're gay. It's not because they're a female. It's not because they're a man or a child. It's not because they're Muslim. It's because they're Black. Blackness has always been criminalized and always been so hated. So this story directly affected me. I was very angry about it. And this is actually before we even really had started having our real conversation about reparations for African Americans. Because I know Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore have been working on their projects and their research, and they've been doing an amazing job. I've been following them for years, but I know they've been working on this for a long time. But I did not really know about ADOS until maybe a few months ago, and I did not, the Windrush victims. I was more upset about that and thinking about that before I was even thinking about what is owed to us. And honestly, what happened in America is like the worst. Oh my gosh, it was like one of the worst. It was the worst that we can think of in modern times, that tragedies that happened to a very, very large group of people. I think it was 400 million, if I can recall the number. I can't remember how many people it was altogether, but it was a lot of Black people that were murdered, inhumanely treated, enslaved. And I actually just saw something else that I read that was actually very disturbing about ADOS. They were saying that there was a study that was done recently. And let me see here. And the study basically said that 1 in 4 families owned slaves. And let me see. Let me see if this is it. Nope. They said 1 in 4 families own slaves, and a good deal of those families owned like 50 slaves or more. I think it was 1 in 200 owned 50 slaves or more. So let's go ahead and listen to this really quickly. Sorry for the ads, guys. I can't get away from it. Hold on one second. Just went through it.
Managing our tasks until one of my colleagues found Monday.com. You can see this. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
So much love for you. So, there's a lot that's been happening across the African continent as well. And recently, the United Kingdom actually announced that they are going to pay minimum of £200 million to Windrush victims, which is basically from the Caribbean. And what happened is that, between 1948 and 1970, about 500,000 African, people moved from the Caribbean to build, to the UK to rebuild the nation after World War II. And they were actually brought here, and the first ship to bring them here was actually called Windrush. So that's how they got named, the Windrush generation. And they were brought here, and they spent decades rebuilding, London and many other cities, which had been totally decimated by, the war. And, so after this had happened, they had during this time, like after World War II, there was also a lot of labor shortages here in the UK, and so a lot of these young men and women helped to fill these positions. Well, now, in 2010, the British government, they've been on this whole anti-immigration front and trying to make sure that, they kind of close the borders of the UK from immigrants. Because, even me being in London, trust me, London is more brown than it is white, if you catch my drift. And so they came up with in 2010, they came up with this policy called the Hostile Environment Policy. And the whole aim of the policy was to make, to create a hostile environment in Britain, for all illegal immigrants. So make it hard for people to, to move here, to return here, find out if people really had a right to be here, etc., etc. And, especially in 2018, this saw a lot of the Windrush generation and their descendants being detained, being deported, being jailed. Some have even talked of how they traveled to the Caribbean on holiday and they were returned the right of entry when they came back. A lot of them in this whole mess lost their homes, couldn't get, their loans. They lost a lot of their licenses. A lot of them couldn't even get work because they were now, they had lost all their rights in the UK. Whereas when the situation is looked at closely, not only had they come as a Windrush generation, but they had lived here for decades and were actually legally here and legally British citizens. So now, this whole hostile environment policy that led to Windrush generation and other Commonwealth citizens not being able to prove their right to remain in the UK created so many problems. And, the whole, I'm just reading my notes and this is so crazy. They actually had a principle of deport first, ask questions later. Can you imagine? That's so cruel and unusual. And so this has, so now as the UK tries to, so there was this whole investigation, people lost their jobs, and in 2018, actually, the British government actually admitted that its treatment of the Windrush generation had been appalling, and they promised to reform their immigration system and compensation for those affected by the policy. So now, literally a year later, we're seeing the compensation package, and it's been announced by the new Home Secretary, who's kind of brought this whole thing about. But I'll be giving you more details about that right after this. Wake up, Africa! You've been affected by what they're calling, is it the Windrush, where they're trying to send people of the Caribbean back?
We all affected by it, but some of us is in denial.
Yeah.
You know, see, and that's the thing about it. You understand? You touch one, you touch all. But to some, because what the man have done is take away our purpose and give some of us a position. And that's why we are in this predicament that we are in today.
A lot of talk that this is like the great year of return, or the great, like the beginning of the great return of Africans to Africa. I see it as Africans to themselves. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's a long time after we are returning, you know. But some of us wait until they hear it on the news. You understand? And that's the problem, you know. Our revolution will not be televised.
Yeah.
You understand? And you being here just showing that the connection is strong, because a couple of years ago it was so weak. They said African from the Caribbean and African from the motherland will never get together and all of these things.
Yeah, well,
we break down that barrier. We break down that barrier.
Yeah.
You understand? And we're forever breaking down barriers.
Okay.
Wake up, Africa!
To Africa Watch on the Dr. Mumbi Show. My name is Dr. Mumbi Saraki. How you doing? How's everything going? So the Windrush generation is going to be paid upwards of 200 million in compensation for what they had to endure during, the last 8 years of the hostile environment policy of the government, where a lot of them were deported. It was deport first, ask questions later, appeal later. A lot of them were denied re-entry into the United Kingdom, and also Commonwealth, who were brought here to work because they couldn't prove, their right to remain. But this is all changing, and the Home Secretary, he was actually brought to tackle this issue, a young Indian gentleman called Sajid Javid or something. Now, he announced that the government will pay up to $200 million. I mean, 200 million pounds. Sorry, this is the UK. 200 million pounds in compensation to people whose lives were damaged by the Home Office's mistaken classification of thousands of long-term British residents as illegal immigrants. And guess what? A lot of them were like this. And they have said, and he went on, he gave this whole speech at the House of Commons, and he said, nothing we say or do will wipe away the hurt, the trauma, the loss that should never have been suffered by men and women of the Windrush generation, but together we can begin to right the wrongs of Windrush. But so these are very, very interesting times, because we're seeing a lot of apologies coming out of left, right, and center. A lot is being said, a lot is being done. Very, very exciting times. What do you guys think? Some families from the Caribbean were interviewed. Some of the affected people were interviewed, and they were just hoping that, it won't be a long application, because they said even that's what brought the problems to begin with, is it was such a long process to kind of, they had to fill all these forms and to prove they were citizens, etc. And that's what created a lot of problems. So they're hoping the compensation won't have as many loopholes. Otherwise, it will be unreachable to most. And, they did say, the Home Secretary actually said that the payment would be restricted to people of the Caribbean origin, but would also be made available to anyone who had been in the UK since 1988, and who were wrongly classified as being in the country illegally, and as a result lost rights of work, access to healthcare, and ability to rent property. So a lot is happening. I know it's getting dark out here, so I'm going to wind up, but a lot is happening. It's absolutely exciting news. Please start giving us other compensations, because, did pay the Mau Mau a couple of years ago, but there's so many reparations that are due to us. But these are exciting times ahead. Things are turning around, my brothers and sisters. Don't give up. May the Most High bless and keep you. Mwah.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
All right, so you guys heard that. That was just amazing news from the Dr. Mumbi Saraki show. And we're going to go on and move over to Yvette Cornell. She had an amazing show last night, and there was a story that this one Black woman gave that literally, I think, had everybody in tears. So let's go ahead and let's start listening.
When affirmative action was white. So that's what we'll be reading May the 23rd. Those of you who have not joined us before on a book club book, this is a pivotal book. To read it is foundational, and I have always sort of mentioned it as such. It is absolutely essential. and understanding. Because you have to understand each period. Because one of the things I always say is that we were re-enslaved in a different way throughout the history of this country. So you have to understand each period, and this is more modern than what I'm about to get into right now. But they're all imperative and pivotal and all of that good stuff. Secondarily, fam, we should all give ourselves a round of applause. Cory Booker introduced for the first time. You know, we've never had a partner. We've had HR 40 in the House. We've never had like a partner in the Senate that I can recall. Introduce a reparations commissions bill. And now our job is to try to get that revised because it doesn't have enough teeth, doesn't have enough meaning, doesn't have enough substance. So that will be the next that will be the next thing that we'll have to do. Understand that politics is a long game. It's a trudging game. It's not always, you don't get quick wins. It's not a basketball game or a football game where you get stuff done in 2 hours. And, you know, people say, well, I don't trust it. I don't trust anything. I will tell you, trust has no place in politics. I don't trust anyone, any place, anywhere, anytime. But I think you have to put pressure on politicians, and politicians respond to pressure, not applause. And so that is what you're seeing. And if we hadn't had that pressure, we wouldn't have gotten this much. So I think we have to give our own selves a round of applause, because this is, regardless of what happens, that we are at this historic moment. It is because of the groundswell that ADOS has created on Twitter and elsewhere, and in real life. You know, in real city council meetings, in real city hall meetings, we've had people ask Clyburn about reparations. We had Beto O'Rourke. We've had people ask Kamala Harris now, and that is all about the groundswell that we have created. So don't ever let anybody tell you that, like, we can't do this or we can't move people. They're never going to listen to us. No, we just have to organize ourselves around something that is central to us as ADOS people, and be very specific and be very concise about what we want and what we need and what we're going to take. You have to make people think about you. People don't just think about you. So please hit that like button, fam. Please hit that like button for me. You know, and you know, do that for me while you're there. It costs you no money. Just hit the like button and we keep it moving. Now, I want to start what I kind of want to do. There's going to be, there is this week, Henry Louis Gates, I think it's this week. I have to check because I have it in my phone. The documentary PBS Reconstruction. If it is, please check it out. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to find out where it's going to be broadcast. But we have to start talking about that, because one of the things that we have to talk about, we have to start talking about American history. Like, we've talked about it on this show, but we have to go all the way back and understand what happened and understand what didn't happen and understand the many things in history that set in place a trajectory for us to be here. This is not happenstance. This is the failure of a country. This is the failure of politicians. And this is why the debt is owed. So I want to introduce you to someone. This is Andrew Johnson. Say hello to Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was Abraham Lincoln's vice president. Now, one of the most notorious stories, he looks kind of like a pirate too, don't he? Swashbuckler. But one of the most notorious stories about this man is how he behaved at inauguration. You know, the president picked this man to be his vice president because he wanted a team of rivals. You remember Obama loved this whole team of rivals garbage. There was the book by Doris Kearns Goodwin, was Team of Rivals, a team of people who disagree. Well, a team of people who disagree causes a lot of problems. Because I can find out what somebody disagrees with me about by reading the book. I ain't got to find that out by having you right beside me. So he got this guy. He got Johnson, and there's a very good book. Not a good book, but there's a very good article. There is a good book too. I think it's called Stanton, about his Secretary of War. But that's another book. We'll get into that. Maybe that'll be a book club book. But how a difficult, racist, stubborn president was removed from power, if not office. Now, the first thing you have to understand about this man we just showed you is what I just told you about the inauguration. You have to understand that he was sort of a drunk. So a person who set the trajectory of what we're living through right now was a mediocre kind of drunk. Now, he feeling ill. I don't buy that feeling ill stuff either. Feeling ill, Johnson threw. This is the inauguration. Let me just set the stage. We're talking inauguration. Feeling ill, Johnson threw down 3 glasses of whiskey right before his swearing-in ceremony and inaugural speech. I need all the strength I can get, he told Hamlin, who was there to hand off the office to Johnson. Off the office Johnson would soon assume. Now, to appeal to non-Republicans and show he wasn't just a northern leader in the middle of the Civil War, the president, they're talking about Lincoln, instead ran on a new national union ticket. He picked Johnson, a lifelong Democrat from Tennessee, who had been the only senator out of 11 southern states to remain with the Union in 1861 instead of walking out of the Senate and leaving a vacant seat protest. Now, you have to understand, remember the party of Lincoln was the radical party, was trying to do the right stuff by black people during that time, and the Democrats were the opposite. You know, you're talking Dixiecrats. So there was a flip-flop. So when we talk Republicans, understand that we're talking about the party of Lincoln. We're not talking about today's Republicans. We're talking about the party of Lincoln, right? So this is what Lincoln chose to do. This is who he chose. This man who got too drunk to talk. And there's a whole story. You can go read it, how he was slurring his words and he almost fell over. And it was embarrassing. He's a mediocre man. But understand something. Look at what happened. Stanton, and I was right, Stanton was Lincoln's war secretary. And you'll find out more about him later on as we go. Lincoln didn't interact much in the 6 weeks between inauguration and Lincoln's assassination on April 14th. Now, when we talk about, before we go on, I want you to understand one thing. Remember that Lincoln's assassin assassinated him. It was about black citizenship. He said, if this thing goes forward, like Lincoln wants it to go forward, if what I believe happens, what's going to happen is that these Negroes are going to be citizens. I'm not having that. He went into that theater and put a bullet in Lincoln. Understand that black citizenship has always been the cause. Black citizenship, like the citizenship, it hasn't been a global, some type of global battle or some type of global domination or whatever you want to call it. The key has always been whether or not we will be citizens in the country that we built. So let's go to the last part. Johnson thus started his time in office without a strong sense of exactly what Lincoln planned. Excuse me 1 second. Woo. Oh, coughing spells, fam. Woo. But I'm going to just let you all go through these because my throat is giving me problems. Periodic, but don't know that. Probably representing Grant's views. Now let me just say, there's a reason why I'm drawing attention to this traitorous man. There's a reason why I'm drawing attention to the traitors in the South. Because it's one of those trajectories, it's one of those areas, it's one of those points where had we been given what we were supposed to be given, we wouldn't have had to deal with the black codes. We would have had political power. And remember, we had legislators during that time. Remember, we had legislators during this period. This is them. But do you want to know what happened to them? This didn't last long because the same racists who owned them ran them out of power. And I'm talking about some of these Hiram rebels he was Booker T. Washington-esque sometimes in his rhetoric. He wasn't a rabble rouser. He wasn't none of that. But listen, nothing happens in this kind of vacuum. When somebody else has power, you don't. Like if somebody else has all the power, you have no power. If you share power, it can be 60-40, 20-80, 50-50. It can be a lot of stuff, but nothing happens in a vacuum. These people ran us out of power. Had they not been there, had everything been stripped of them, we would have everything that we're looking for right now. And this isn't a Pan-African story. This is an American story. This is American history. And that is the lens through which you have to understand this. When you read this, Johnson vetoed both the civil rights bills designed to fight back the dreaded black codes and another measure to expand the functions of the Freedmen's Bureau. His message to Congress about the latter veto included condescending language like urging legislators to take more mature considerations. The vetoes enraged Capitol Hill, especially the author of the bills, to whom Johnson had raised no objections when he sought the president's opinions. Listen, he wasn't removed from office. He was impeached, but there were some Democrats who didn't go and then they lost their jobs and didn't sign on or whatever the case may be. And so he didn't have to leave office, but they boxed him in to where he couldn't do no more damage. But he done enough damage. He single-handedly, he released them people. What do you mean he released them people? I mean, he released them people. Them Confederates, he brought them out of hide and let them get all their stuff back. The stuff that was supposed to be given to us, he gave to them. When you ask why this country owes us, people said he believed in states' right and that they hadn't seceded, they were just sort of rebellious. So they didn't necessarily get treated as traitors, just like, I mean, you fought a whole war and people have died, but this is just like what, rebellious school children? And so you see that here. What Southern dynasties, post-Civil War resurgence, tell us about how wealth is really handed down. You see that these people got to keep their money. That's what you see. While we got re-enslaved with convict leasing and black codes, because you have to understand, let me just bring this up. When we bring up the black codes, understand what the black codes were. You have to understand this meant that we weren't citizens. So you said you made us free, but we weren't free. The black codes were laws passed by southern states in 1865 and 1866 in the United States after the American Civil War with the intent and effect of restricting African Americans' freedom and compelling them to work in labor economies based on low wages or debt. We talking about sharecropping. We talking about convict leasing. We talking about we still not free. We talking about re-enslavement. And our wealthlessness is the consequence. So slave-owning dynasties regained their wealth, and we just never got any. So let me make this smaller so you can see. Cut off a little bit. Hold on 1 second. Here we go. So we have to stop thinking about slavery as just, and it was, but as just this inhumane thing. It was all of that. But it was also a transfer of wealth that never stopped. That wealth is still being traded down, and that poverty is still being traded down to us. See, and you can read this as well, but let me just a little bit from this article. But less than 2 decades after the Civil War, Southern slave-owning dynasties were back on top of the economic ladder, according to an ambitious new analysis. And you can read the analysis. I'm going to bring up some tweets. So you're saying less than 2 decades, that's not even like a generation or whatever. Less than 2 decades after the Civil War, Southern slave-owning dynasties were back on top. Traitors who had betrayed their countries to enslave Our ancestors were back on top. What kind of punishment is that? What do you mean? That's how they got the power. And what you have to understand about that is that means that somebody succeeded and somebody failed. And who failed with us? Our government failed. Our government didn't do what was necessary for us. Understand? The government was supposed to not only punish them. You ever look at how the Nazis got punished? And people are still chasing that Nazi money. Like, it's funny, we don't even want to chase money around here. But Jewish people, and to their right, are still chasing that Nazi money. I've seen a bunch of stories as of late about how this company was built. See, when you say a company was built on slave money or Nazi money, what you're really saying is that you shouldn't exist. Because you exist off of owning human beings. Your company, your wealth should not exist. And they running around here trying to get that Nazi money. And we don't even look at that Southern money. And we don't even look at the reparations money that the government owes us for not protecting us as citizens and still not protecting us as citizens. See, this is the case that you have to make if you want to make reparations. You can't put on no red, black, and green and run around here. That's not what it is. This is an American story. I don't care how you feel about it. I don't care how you feel, or you don't want to wear the flag, or you don't feel it's your flag. You ain't even been nowhere. And unless you're going to move there, I don't understand the problem. You have to understand. Jewish people understand that their story, what happened to them in terms of Hitler and what happened to them in terms of extermination and all of that. They understand that. They understand where that story was, and they understand to a T. They understand with great specificity who hurt and harmed their people. And they're chasing that money around. Now, we are running around here trying to chase all white people. But we just going to go after whiteness. And whiteness is a globalized thing. And it's taking everybody got to chase their own devil. You can chase your devil over there. I'm going to chase mine over here. We got to chase our own devils, though. I can't be running around. We can't be scattered. We can learn lessons from each other. Globally, we can learn lessons from each other. I'm sure there are lessons that we could take from the ending of apartheid, and there are lessons they can take from us. But we got to chase our own devils. This is American history right here, and our contribution is right here. It's not over there. It's not down the street. It's not in Nigeria or South Africa or Eritrea or Ethiopia or Ghana or none of that. It's right here. And the case for reparations is in American history books. I don't care what you tell me. I don't care how much you tweet me. I can see it right here. I can see how America failed me and my ancestors right here. And it is abominable. Let me just say something. It is abominable how many of you people online, you red, black, and green Negroes, have been chasing me around, but haven't been chasing around the devil who owes you money. You should be ashamed of yourself. If you all had put as much work into chasing me and Antonio as you had put into reparations work, we'd be almost there, if not there by now. You always running around chasing the wrong thing, chasing your own fool tail. That is a problem. You are a problem. Get in line. We are moving. You need to polish off your boots and become a soldier. Now is not the time for all this madness that you have engaged us in. America created more wealth because they used us in a very specific way. Read The Half Has Never Been Told. They used us from bone to blood. And imagine being able to just create new slaves because your slaves have babies. Like, you creating new slaves. You ain't even gotta. And I don't want you to be an inhumane person, but just think right now. Like, wake up in the morning, you got a bunch of slaves. Make the slaves whatever you want. You can make them alien. I don't care. But just think, you wake up in the morning. Everything that you do in your day is done by somebody else. Now look, say you got 1,000 ideas in your head. And you think those ideas could be worth something. But now, you don't have to farm the land, or you don't have to do whatever you want to do, or or you just go do it. I ain't gotta pay you nothing. I ain't gotta work. You just go do it. And guess what? I want you to go sleep with this person and sleep with this person. I want a bunch of babies. I want them to be pregnant. I need more little babies to do stuff and all the little stuff they can pick with their little cotton heads. And that's gonna be my life. And then if you're a white woman and you inherit them slaves, if your husband dies, men a lot of times die younger, then somebody was looking for you. Somebody higher up the food chain was looking for you because they wanted to marry you because you had a bunch of slaves. Them slaves is money. Think about the advantage of that. And think about what that means in terms of what we are owed. All the way from there to now. It has never stopped. That slave money never left the economy. Listen, let's go into it. Let's go back here. The sons of formerly enslaved people never caught up. Of course. By 1880, more than 90% of them were still in the South, and most still worked as farm laborers, tenant farmers, or sharecroppers. In the 120 years that followed, they consistently saw lower pay and less upward mobility than similar white men. Let's keep going. The gulf in economic status between slave and owner is incalculably large. And slave ownership was widespread. Now, we've always heard, I want you to slow down for a second. How many times have y'all always heard, oh, only a few people own slaves? It wasn't only a couple people in the South really owned slaves. It was a battle of elite. Nobody said everybody owned slaves. Nobody said that, like, there were not poor white people in the South. There was a lot of people running around eating clay, doing all kind of, like, weird stuff. But anyway, it says more than 1 in 5 white households own slaves. About 1 in 200 own 50 or more enslaved people. That's a lot of slaves. That's a lot of slave owners. That's a lot of slave owners who went back to being, thank you, Clementine. That's a lot of slave owners who went back to being slave owners after slavery was over. Listen, these federal troops, the feds left. Remember, they withdrew their troops, didn't protect us, left us to the wolves. Y'all didn't stay with us. Y'all didn't do no long-term generational plan to make sure them Southerners didn't enforce them black codes. You abandoned us. You abandoned us to the KKK. You abandoned us to the people who had enslaved us and then enslaved us all over again. And you didn't care. You owe for that. Because that's what we could not do. We could not become free. There was no freedom when there was convict leasing. Go read Slavery by Another Name. They could just pick Negroes, and we're just picking Negroes up off the street for anything and making them be guilty for a crime and then having them work in these convict leasing places. And that's why, remember we found those dead bodies. They found all these dead bodies in these convict leasing places because they would work these people to the bone. Like, there are stories of, like, going into these convict leasing facilities and Negroes, you could just see the bone. Weren't even really feeding them. There was one story of this man who somebody caught on to him, I think the story went, and so he just, instead of, like, dealing with the repercussions, he just killed all of the black people who he had there. As you know, he don't care. What does he care for? I mean, why does he work? And then think about it. We didn't even get to protect our intellectual property. So how many white families right now are living off the intellectual property of a slave? Slave invented something. He couldn't patent it because he got no rights or she got no rights, right? So what happens is the slave owner patents it, and that money, that whatever that generated, is still being generated into the future, into now. They living off that money, that the slave, but that's what happens when you have no rights. And the only people and the only entity that can make up for that and pay for that is the government. The government owes for that. I'm not saying that private corporations do not also owe. They do. I absolutely agree. But the government was supposed to protect us from that as citizens. You can't make us citizens then not do your duty and due diligence to uphold our citizenship. You just can't do it. It just doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so let's go.
Have your ADOS stuff that's just for your state, and you have your ADOS stuff that's just for your congressional, and you have your ADOS stuff that's just for your local. You have a whole tier of ADOS priorities for your community, and you and every ADOS in that community have to be very clear on what that is, because people will come out talking real sweet. Yeah, we're gonna add 500,000 to the playground down your street. You be like, oh, that sounds good. It got babies. I got babies. We got play. And then you be like, you be like, yeah, we're a family. No. That's nothing. Be clear on what your number is in terms of what you need. You got to be clear on your math. And you got to be clear on the math of other communities and what they get. And you got to be clear on the fact that you ain't getting enough based on the generational trauma and the generational theft of this community. You got to be very, very clear and very, very accurate as a community to do that. So I'm going to my next call right now. I am going to 843. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your...
Cannot understand how anyone could say no to ADOS. I just cannot fathom being rejected. And me as a little girl remembering going out in the field with my granddad, my grandmama, even my dad, he was in the military. And I remember when he got out of the military, he came back home and he worked on the farm with my granddad. My granddad, he was like very sickly, but he still would be out in that field, just working, getting those tomatoes. And I remember my mom telling me things about they could never, ever catch up. And, this is just the hardship that I've had to endure, because I remember this, but yet going out into the world myself and still, trying to get along and finding love. I maybe can understand this a lot more than anyone, because, being raised in South Carolina hasn't been very easy, because there has been a lot of racism here, and it still is. And someone should be held accountable, because just like your last caller, he was talking about how people here are still impoverished, and this is true. Even in my family, I have a lot of people that are very poor, and with that poor, people doesn't understand that there's severe depression that goes along with this. There's a form of humiliation. I did, I went in the military, and I had the things that happened in the military, which I won't go into, but also I've managed to be discriminated against, working on my jobs, even after the military also. But also seeing my dad during the 70s, the 80s, and 90s here in South Carolina. I remember him working out on the golf course. He wasn't making any money. Him and my mom had 8 children. My dad had to work like 2 or 3 jobs to take care of his children. So, no one can understand the humiliation that Black people go through. And really, I don't really think a lot of people really care. But it's not like Black people are asking for a handout.
No.
We are only asking for, an extension of something to just pull ourselves up so we can be better able to function in the world just like everybody else. And it's just not fair for everyone to come to this country and think that we're just laying around doing nothing when that's not the case. Like I said, most Black people who have been enslaved, who are part of slavery, suffer with severe depression. And that depression has been going on from generation to generation. And sometimes I look at some of my relatives and I can see in their face how they want to do so much more. They want so much more out of life. And they just like are moving around in circles, like they don't know which way to go, don't know what to do, and you receive God as your Lord and your Savior, but also even God wants his children to be taken care of. He wants his children to be blessed. Yes, we are forgiving people, we are loving people, but no one understands that we are forgiving, but also we need someone to take time to look at us and to understand. Yes, we work hard, but we want the finer things in life like everybody else. We don't want to wait until we die and go to heaven to get our reward. We want our reward on earth right now. We want to be able to, for our families to have, nice things and to live successfully. We want our children to have nice homes to live in. We don't want our children living in the ghettos. We don't want our children living in rundown shacks forever and forever. That's not what we want. We need to be compensated. We need to be given what is due us like every other country. Everybody else is compensated except us. It's just not fair.
I agree.
It's just not fair.
I agree. I thank you. Thank you, Colin. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I want to thank you for calling in and sharing that. I mean, because I think the personal experience.
And
Go ahead.
And Miss Yvette, please let everyone know that Black people not only suffer from poverty, but they are also suffering from depression.
Absolutely.
They are sick. A lot of Black people are actually literally sick. This is why they're killing each other, because they are absolutely sick.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well,
thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Colin.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. Like, that kind of forced oppression and forced poverty creates. There's something that the caller said that really touched me, which she said, the hardship that I have had to endure. And I think if you talk to every DOS person, ADOS, and I include a whole bunch of people in that category. I think almost all ADOS will tell you about the hardship that they've had to endure that is linked directly to their ADOSness. And nobody else can tell you that. I mean, this is across the board. No other community has that across the board. And she's right when she talks about depression and mental health. Being oppressed like that creates a myriad of dysfunction. Being oppressed like that creates a myriad of various kinds of dysfunctions and dysfunctional behaviors, and people who can't get out of bed in the morning, and people who self-medicate, and people who, hurt each other because hurt people be hurting people, all kinds of stuff. Like, that's what we live. And what we also do, we project that inward instead of projecting it outward in terms of some type of political mobilizing. We project that pain back onto each other, because we don't know that we need to take that pain and that energy from that pain, and we need to take that and project that in the way of our political apparatus, and we need to use that pain and that suffering as fuel to empower us to move ourselves forward. But we use that and project that towards each other. If there's one thing that we can learn from this process, it's that we cannot internalize this trauma. This trauma can be fuel, it can be energy, but we have to give that trauma, and we have to give it meaning. And by giving it meaning, we have to use it as fuel to do something good that makes the ancestors proud, that makes people like her father, her grandfather, who suffered on sharecropper farm and never could get ahead because it wasn't set up for them to get ahead. It wasn't set up for that. It was set up for the white owner of the sharecropper farm to always be ahead. We have to understand that, and the best we can do is not to take that pain out on each other. We have to use that pain to mobilize ourselves, and to mobilize ourselves specifically to love each other and put that out there to the world in terms of use that as the energy for the fight ahead, because this fight ain't going to be slow. I never thought it was. We've gotten a lot of attention, But then, pretty soon the jackals is gonna start coming out, right? That's how it works. But we got to be in this. We got to be in this all the way. So, fam, I'm going to my next call.
All right, guys. So those are the two main videos I wanted you guys to watch in terms of ADOS and our reparations fight. I was talking to my fiance last night, and what I really realized is that with the whole reparations battle or war, we're at war right now, but the reparations that we're bringing up is ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves. I feel like the main reason why a lot of Black people don't support it or don't understand why it is owed to us is because they don't educate themselves. And I believe people don't self-educate for various reasons. They're like, maybe it's just laziness. They want to just listen to rap music or whatever Love and Hip Hop is talking about. But I essentially believe that a lot of things that Black people are going through is based on low self-esteem. I mean, you live in America that absolutely hates Black people. I mean, this country hates Black people. And if you look at the history, they've made it very clear. Like when Andrew Johnson, the first they killed Abraham Lincoln. I mean, it looked like he only served 6 weeks as president, which I actually did not know that until just now when I was really paying attention to the numbers. But when they assassinated him, Andrew Johnson became president, and as Yvette Carnell said, he was a drunkard, and he was a racist, and he basically put all the Confederate soldiers back into power of their plantations. And it's again slavery by another name. Like, even though we were quote unquote free, we weren't free. Like, they put the Confederate soldier guys who were traitors and committed treason against this country were allowed to regain their land, their power, their resources, and they re-enslaved us. They created these black codes. They took over the government in the South again. And this stuff did not just happen in the South. There were a lot of industries built up north that is also built off of the backs and bodies of slaves. And I mean, literally, the Wall Street building is built on, well, what I've heard is that it's built on, like, we could do more research. I love receipts, but it's built on the mass grave of African American slaves. And that pisses me off severely. So when Black people such as myself talk about reparations, we have to be bold. We have to be powerful. We have to be none fearing of the white supremacy, the white establishment. Anything people say to you is like she said, the jackals will come, and they have already came for us. And we don't come for ADOS. That's what we want to tell you, like straight up off the top, because we coming for you, and you will be dealing with this reckoning that you deserve. So we definitely have found ways you have to educate yourself, Black people, because people are going to come and try to tell you, oh, it's a handout, or slavery was 100 years ago, or, they're going to try so many different tactics to basically deflect and just remove you from your fight. Stand on your square, be firm, and do not move for anybody. Like, let them know, absolutely not. We are coming for our check. Martin Luther King Jr. said that we were owed a check, and of course land. Of course, we just say cut the check, but we know it's way more than that is owed to ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves. Abraham Lincoln promised 40 acres and a mule. And then Andrew Johnson's drunk ass, turned around and just undid everything that Abraham Lincoln was trying to do during the Reconstruction era. And, Andrew Johnson basically repealed that, kind of like what, Trump does with Obama's stuff. He tries to get rid of all his stuff, and then just, Obamacare, etc., and put his own junk in place. And so, it's time for African Americans to tell our own story. It's time for us to not be quiet. It's time for us to not try to get along with people and be buddies, because that's not going to feed anyone. It's time for us to educate our children. And the reason why this struggle is so important is because by 2053, we will have zero wealth. We will be a permanent underclass. We will be permanently impoverished. and in poverty. And so you don't want this for your children. We don't. I know I don't. I have 5 Black sons. I'm really concerned about them growing up in this country as children. I don't, I have to watch like where my children can play. A cop just pulled my son to the side, not even a couple of weeks ago, they claimed he was jaywalking, but he wasn't jaywalking, and even if he was, he's 14. Like, what does he know about laws? He's not an adult. And my son was scared. They had another cop behind him. And the study has shown, the more interactions, Black people have with cops, the higher chance we have of being murdered. So it's very scary. And I told my son, I was like, don't go to that basketball court. So it was like, we have to maneuver now. And I tell people, we're in the new Jim Crow. People are able to kill us now without punishment. The white people, the race soldiers, the racists like George Zimmerman, they're allowed to kill us. They're creating these laws now, which again, to me, are basically Black codes all over again, like the Stand Your Ground law, where they could kill us and then claim, I shot him in self-defense, which is what George Zimmerman used to get him off from killing a 17-year-old child, Trayvon Martin. And he's still walking free. George Zimmerman's still walking free to this day and committing more crimes as we speak. So reparations is extremely an important fight. We're not going anywhere. American ADOS, Descendants of Slaves, we aren't going anywhere. That's just what it is, So people like I had to block this. I had to block like 2 people last couple of days. Like in one day, I blocked 2 people. One was because this guy kept talking about in Cobra, and ADOS does not have anything against any other group that's out there. We just know what has not been happening. We know that the reparations conversation has not been a topic of discussion for decades. HR 40 has sat in the Congress, just sitting there for like 30 years. So, Conyers, I think it was Senator Conyers who introduced the bill before he retired, and he passed it off to Senator Sheila Jackson Lee, and it's just been sitting there, and no one's been doing anything with it. There's been, even if people have been trying to do stuff with it and it just wasn't really working, that's okay. So it's like now the ADOS found something that's working. Get behind us. You're stupid if you're sitting here trying to use your little stupid, like trying to sit here and say, well, we came up with it first. Da, 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 da. No one came up with the reparations conversation in modern times first. Reparations has been owed to us for centuries, and we already know that. That's why Abraham Lincoln promised 40 acres and a mule. So our ancestors have been knowing about reparations. So you're not getting a cookie for knowing about reparations first. We don't give a shit who knew first. We're giving a shit about results. We want results. ADOS functions off of data, scientific data, math, facts, and we want results. We want a check. We want money. We want land. We want resources. We want that HR 40 bill to be eradicated, amended and fixed so that it applies to what, works for us, ADOS today. We need Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore, and Sandy Darity in those rooms. No, not Al Sharpton. No Al Sharpton. No Jesse Jackson. No Mike Thompson, who nobody knew. What's his name? Mark Thompson. The minister is what is it? The @ symbol minister with 2 T's on Twitter with his big yellow dashiki shirt talking to Joy Reid. Who are you? Who the hell are you? And I'm going to show you guys a picture of him real quick so y'all know who I'm talking about. He came about the woodworks. And it's like everyone, all these people that have been quote unquote civil rights leaders, I call them civil rights non-leaders because they ain't been leading nothing but themselves straight to the bank with, butter biscuits and white zaddy dollars. They have been dormant. And I'm tired. I'm so sick of the American public pretending that these Black people that had their heyday in the civil rights movement, I'm so sick of them pretending that they're the voice of Black people. Black people do not respect Al Sharpton. We do not care about Al Sharpton. We don't care about no Mark Thompson. We don't care about celebrities talking for us. I don't want Beyonce, Cardi B, Jay-Z, none of them speaking for me. I don't want none of them speaking for me. I don't trust them. They've got their money from, these white people and they're bought and paid for slaves. I don't trust Jamel Hill. Like anyone you see on national news outlets that are owned by Jews and white people, stop it. Like, no, I absolutely, you will not speak for ADOS. ADOS is not a minority. Stop calling us people of color. We are black. When you created black codes, you didn't create people of color codes. You created black codes. When you created slavery, it wasn't based on people of color. So Asians were slaves, and everybody of color, Hispanics were slaves. Everybody of color was slaves with us. Native Americans would say, no, black people were slaves. Black people were slaves. You chose slavery based on our skin color. So now you need to pay us based on our color. Do not sit here trying to come up with, oh, people of color, this bullshit. Because what you do when they do that, they basically put us all in the same pot. All the immigrants that just came here like 2 days ago, they put Asians, Irish people, Hispanics, LGBTQ, white women who claim they're a minority. How the hell did white women become a minority? Give me a break with that. They're 50% of the white population, which is the majority of this country. How are you a minority? And as Yvette Carnell said, there's actually a book that said white women owned slaves. It's like a book that I just saw on Amazon. So it's like you have to read. There's another book called American Freedom, American Slavery, American Freedom. And then you have this right here, the massive overlooked role of females, white females owning slaves in history. Like they just painted this whole, like, again, they're telling the story. So they painted this, angelic, white, pure white female who was just, she was so passive and docile next to her slave owning crazed husband. That's not true. Even to this day, studies and facts and science show that men do not live longer than women. That was still happening even back then. For some reason, I don't know why, but men are dying before women. So who do you think inherited this wealth? It wasn't their sons getting it. It was the women. It's estimated that 40% of slave owners may have been white women. It's not may have, they have been. The massive overlooked role of female slave owners, because there's books on this stuff. If this thing jumps from page to page and stuff I don't want to see right now, I'm going to lose it. Let me see. I hate going to a website and it's just so many pop-ups. So much. Oh, my goodness. What in the world? Did I click on something that I don't know about? Yeah, moving. Anyway, so that was that. I can't be bothered. But we just have to focus on the Black agenda, and the Black agenda is reparations. So all these people jaw jacking, like the other day, I think it was yesterday, Alicia Garza of Black Lives Matter. This female, I wish I could find her tweet. It was so offensive. And she's just one of many who have come for ADOS and Yvette Carnell and the ADOS movement in tone. They attacking our founders, they're attacking us. And to me, that is saying that you don't want us to have the voices to speak. You don't respect us enough to want us to be allowed to speak. But we are citizens of this country. We are Americans. We have built this country. We are law-abiding citizens. We pay taxes. Why, when we say something's not right, you want to shut us down and discredit us and undermine us and say, oh, you guys are, she said this was a homophobic, xenophobic movement, blah, 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 blah. And, Yvette Carnell came for her. And she was just like, how can this be homophobic, xenophobic, etc., when I'm one of the founders? And that's how we all feel. How can it be xenophobic when we know, a lot of us know that we are Africans by lineage? We know that that's part of our lineage, and we were stolen out of Africa. I mean, who doesn't know that story, at least? So, let me see if I can find her tweet. And this is not even really what I was trying to look for, to be honest, but it's so much. It's just so much. Like, we're trying to fight for a movement here, and people are just slamming us from every side. And There's actually, I know I'm not going to find it. There's actually a white man that actually had to come, check Alicia Garza. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, why are people that aren't even black defending us and having to explain stuff to a so-called Black Lives Matter leader? How the hell are you a leader of Black Lives Matter and you're totally okay with coming out on Twitter and saying these things? And this stuff is so, like, people don't want to give power to the internet, but there's so much power. You coming out and saying stuff like that is very crushing. Like, I mean, our movement's going to happen, don't get me wrong, but we have to, like, come for you and destroy you for saying those words, because you're trying to destroy our movement. And the crazy thing is, we're not worried about you, because we know you're not a threat. We just, the real reason why ADOS doesn't care about these other groups is because we just don't care. We're fighting for reparations, and that's what we know is owed to us. And we don't care what other people think. And so when people talk to you about it being a handout, it's been over 100 years ago, or blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, that's what I wanted to show you guys. It hasn't been over 100 years ago. When people say these things, you need to educate yourself and your family members and your friends and the people that you're connected to on social media. Put these posts out there. Social media matters. This stuff matters. It has power. It's your voice. You're finally allowed to speak. It's like someone's had their mouth over you all this time. You're finally allowed to speak. Let me see here. They had Slave. Did she just die, or? My goodness. Something happened recently to show that slavery really wasn't that far away. I think this was it. And yeah, this was it. So Washington Post, and hopefully they let me see my article, because sometimes they try to get you to subscribe. I'm not subscribing. They have enough of my money off of the backs of my ancestors. So they said the last survivor of a slave ship has been identified, and her story is remarkable. Her name was Radoshi. A British researcher announced this week, and she may have been 110 years old. And when she died in Alabama in 1937. And as far as lineage matters, guys, get on ancestry.com, look up your ancestors. You might have to pay $19.99 a month, or a little bit extra a month, which to me is priceless to be able to build your family tree. So it's worth it. And it's not fair. I admit it's not fair that we have to pay to find our own ancestors. Like, this is bullshit. Again, this is another part of what's to be given back to us by reparations. And I know people are also like, oh, I don't trust giving companies my DNA, blah, blah. But the reality is, if they want your DNA, they'll get it, or they already have it. Because I was in the military, so they already have mine. So I was like, whatever. But my family was in Alabama for over 200 years. So this story definitely speaks to me, that she died in Alabama in 1937. I have traced my ancestors back to about 4 or 5 generations was when I first saw the first possible slave in my family. And the reason why I knew she was possibly a slave is because they put mulatto on her census paperwork, that when she became quote unquote free and became a citizen, she was finally able to fill out census paperwork. And before that, though, her parents it was a white man and a black, I'm pretty sure it was a black woman. I believe that they did not list the mother of that ancestor on the family tree, because she probably did not fill out census paperwork because she was a slave. So once you're considered property and you're not a citizen, they did not put their names on census paperwork from what I saw for my family and my lineage. But they would put like how many slaves they owned, and they would just put like number, like one, or, like how many slaves do you own between ages 1 and 5. They was ages 1 and 5. They put 1, age 10 and 15, you put 3, or and so on and so forth. How many male slaves do you have? How many female slaves? So they would keep count, because if you're property for a very booming industry that's based off of this property, you're going to definitely keep inventory of your property. And slaves were their property, and we were making them lots of money, so they definitely kept track of us. So don't think for a minute that they have no clue of the record of how many slaves are there. And this stuff is all coming out because of the internet and the technology, and I love it. I was, you guys know my background. If you listen to my other videos, is my background is information technology. But I know this is a gift from God, for Black people to finally become free and be able to research this information, find out who we truly are, because they're not going to teach you that in public schools. And personally, I think it's not even their jobs. They're our enemy. We know this. Some of us don't know this, but you need to learn this. And you need to definitely teach your children the truth. And some people say, oh, you're teaching your kids hate. No, I'm not. I'm teaching them the truth. This is American history. Why in the hell would I sugarcoat what happened to my ancestors? My ancestors, that doesn't even make sense to me. They deserve better than that. They went through hell, some of the worst crimes that's ever been put upon humans in history and in of the entire world. There's no way I'm going to sit here and tell my sons, oh, this is slavery happened. It was a horrible thing, but we shall overcome. No, I'm gonna keep it real with them and be like, this is what happened to us, and we're gonna read books. I ordered. Yvette Carnell has a book club where she tells you which books to get, and we discuss them. So the next book that's coming out says When Affirmative Action Was White. I just ordered that book on Amazon. It wasn't too expensive. I think it was like $10 or something. And those books with the book club, I'm going to be reading those with my son. I do homeschool. I took my two older sons out of public school last year, like I took my 14-year-old out like 2 years prior, and then my 12-year-old, we still had him in for a little bit because he was in elementary school. He wasn't struggling as much with that environment, but we could tell he was kind of having some problems. And then there was all these school shootings, so we went in and pulled him out. But let's go ahead and read this article. So she was captured at about the age of 12 in West Africa and forced aboard the Clotilda, the last slave vessel to arrive in the United States in 1860. Now researchers have identified Redoshi as the last known African-born survivor of the transatlantic slave trade when she died in 1937, according to a statement released Tuesday by Newcastle University in Great Britain. Renamed Sally Smith in Alabama, she may have been 110 years old at the time of her death. Until now, researchers believe the last survivor of the transatlantic slave trade was Uluwale Kasala, also known as Cujo Lewis. And my goodness, that name sounds so familiar. I don't know why. I don't know if he wrote a book or there's some book on him. But okay, let me keep going so I don't get sidetracked. But according to research by Hannah Durkin, a lecturer at Newcastle University, Redoshi lived 2 years longer than Cujo, who died in 1935. Durkin says she first saw a reference to Redoshi in the writings of Zora Neale Hurston and began researching her life story from other writings. In 2018, HarperCollins published Hurston's manuscript, Barracoon. One second, guys. I want to research something really quickly. Zora Neale Hurston. Okay, never mind. I was thinking Ida B. Wells. Sorry. So 90 years after she wrote it, Barracoon detailed the life of Kasala, or Cujo Lewis, who was just a teenager when he was captured in what is now Benin. Kasala and more than 100 Africans were forced to board the Clotilda in 1860, even though the United States had banned the importation of enslaved people in 1808. The Clotilda, a retrofitted timber cargo ship, illegally carried 110 Africans to Mobile, Alabama. It was the last slave ship to arrive in the United States. And that's interesting because I have so many. My family comes from Alabama. We've been there for 200 years. My mom said we used to be like the largest family in that area. I don't know yet. I'm still doing a lot of research, but yeah. So every time I hear about Alabama, it just speaks to me. I was actually born in Montgomery, Alabama, so it just really speaks to me, and it's like makes me want to do even more research about my ancestors. Like, could I have been related to these people? Because I mean, it was just a lot of overlapping and incest and all that happening to create more slaves. So it's just really there's like a generation where things just start to overlap, where you can tell there was probably people having to have sex with family members to produce more slaves. And it's quite disgusting. And again, just humiliating and horrific. There's no words. Like, I can't even think of words to explain this. But let me finish reading and then go ahead and wrap this video up because it's starting to get too long. Redoshi was among the human cargo, Durkin said, and the story of her life provides important information on the illegal slave trade and the tragedy of slavery. These materials add hugely to our understanding of transatlantic Atlantic Slavery as a Lived Experience. Durkin, a lecturer in literature and film in Newcastle University School of English Literature, Language and Linguistics, said in the statement, "Now we know that its horrors endured in living memory until 1937, and they allow us to meaningfully consider slavery from a West African woman's perspective for the first time. After she was kidnapped and forced aboard the Clotilda, Redoshi was sold in Alabama to plantation owner Washington Smith, who also founded the Bank of Selma." Okay, so does that ring a bell? The March in Selma with Martin Luther King Jr. and all these civil rights leaders who are now alive and doing nothing. And that's another thing I notice when people seem to get to live these long lives, it's definitely because they're probably working with the government and have sold their people out for their own skin. So there she was given the name Sally Smith. Last year, a reporter discovered that he believed was the wreck of the Clotilda buried in mud along the Mobile Tensal Delta just north of Mobile. But subsequent research found it was not the Clotilda. According to historical accounts, the owners of the ship burned it in 1860 to hide evidence of its illegal human cargo. In Alabama, Redoshi was forced to work nearly 5 years. Here's the video right here, I guess. But she was first to work nearly 5 years in both the house and the fields on the Bogue Cheeto plantation in Dallas County, Alabama. And I do have family from Dallas County, Alabama, based on my family tree. And her husband, who was known as William or Billy. That's another thing you guys are going to notice on your Ancestry.com. The names are going to, you just kind of try to put two and two together because the names can vary on the census paperwork. But her husband, who was known as William or Billy, was kidnapped with her and died in the 1910s or 1920s, Durkin said. Durkin said she found information about Redoshi's life in an interview in the Montgomery Advertiser and in Bridge Across Jordan, a memoir by Amelia Boynton Robinson. After the Emancipation Proclamation, Redoshi continued to live with her daughter on the plantation where she was enslaved until her death in 1937. She lived through tremendous trauma and separation, Durkin said, but there is also a sense of pride in these texts. Her resistance, either through her effort to own her own land in America or in smaller acts like keeping her West African beliefs alive, taking care in her appearance in her home, and the joy she took in meeting a fellow African in the 1930s, helped to show who she was. And this is just so my heart is like breaking, but it's like, because I can almost feel these stories. This wasn't that long ago. I mean, my goodness, like our grandparents were alive around that time, because my mom was born in 1958. My grandmother's 84, so she had to have been like born or around that time. So this isn't that far removed from us. So people saying, slavery was a long time ago, it's just a load of crap. I'm sorry. It just doesn't sit well with me now, and I think that's why it's so important that Black people do educate themselves on their history, because white people are not going to tell you the truth. They've been doing everything they can to cover up our history since the beginning of time, from ancient times to now with the Egyptians and all that. They're whitewashing Egyptian art to make them look white, when in reality a white person could not have survived in Africa without getting boils on their back. That doesn't even make sense. And to know that black people are the original people of this earth. We were the first people on this earth for billions of years before any other races were even existing. How in the heck are you guys, white people, pretending they were just all over this place? They're only 6,000 years old. So, okay, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this story up. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to put them in, the comment section below. If this video you feel gave you any information, please like, share, and subscribe, because I have way more, so many videos coming to you guys to keep you informed and get this message. This is what's mostly important to me, is getting that message out there. It's about the people, and that's really what we need to continue to focus on. It's not about popularity or money or, any of that with this YouTube video. It's about my people, and anyone who's really about the people. We're not getting rich off of this. We're doing this to liberate us, because honestly, if one of us is enslaved, all of us is enslaved. There is no freedom for, some Black people and others get to be. No, we're all enslaved. And until we're all free, we will continue to fight for Black liberation all across the globe. I love you guys. Peace, love, and light. Until I speak to you again, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye.